Imagine a state where 80% of all existing structures were built by undocumented workers. From the trees to the buildings to the roads to the signs, everything but the blue sky itself in the state of Florida has been touched by the hands of undocumented workers. Even officials in government agree that there have to be at least 1 million undocumented workers in the state of Florida. This undocumented labor force has led to the fastest growth of population that the state has ever seen. But with the state's building boom coming to an end, instead of more demand, we're actually seeing price reductions in the state of Florida. It's questionable whether the state of Florida will even need these illegal immigrants, since after all, we're not seeing growth. We're seeing, well, the opposite. Over 80% of the labor used to build new homes in the state of Florida is done by undocumented workers. I spent a few days going from construction site to construction site here in Southwest Florida to confirm what we already know, that the overwhelming majority of the labor being done at these job sites is done by undocumented workers. Interestingly, while trying to get today's footage for the video, recording job sites and construction sites in the Sarasota area, we encountered a group of people who must have been drunk early in the morning and flipped a golf cart in Lakewood Ranch. Later on in the day, we were working in Sarasota trying to record a group of workers who were setting up some final touches on a new roundabout, putting down mulch and other landscaping details, when we encountered an American homeless man who was attacking the workers. He can be seen here wearing a red shirt swinging at midair in front of these construction vehicles while they're trying to unload their work equipment. He was disturbing them while they were working. I guess he wanted one of these high visibility vests from them, and he kept pestering them until they finally gave it to him. But the reality is that the average American is too drunk or high to be put on a roof these days, and the overwhelming majority of the work in construction sites ends up being done by undocumented people. I recently talked to a contractor here in Southwest Florida who told me that he's not going to put some intoxicated, hungover crackhead on a roof of $1 million construction site so he can fall off and try to sue him. He said in the past, when he's tried to hire U.S. citizens to do construction work, when there was immigration pressure, they ended up getting hurt on the construction sites, doing seemingly routine operations that don't require getting hurt, and then promptly asking about the company's insurance policies before being fired. So unfortunately for the vast homeless population of Florida, no contractor is going to put somebody on a roof who probably won't show up to work sober, or if you have to watch them to make sure they're sober before they get on the job site. Contractors don't have time to play those games. They have to have reliable workers they know are going to show up, they know are going to be sober, and are not going to get hurt on job sites. They're not going to babysit you. You have to be sober and within your full capacity to be on a job site with dangerous heavy equipment. As of 2023, almost 60% of construction workers in Florida are of Hispanic background. Now, officially, only 4% of Florida's population is undocumented, which means that, according to official figures, roughly 1 in 6 Hispanics is undocumented. But realistically, I think that number is really 1 in 3 or 1 in 4, to where overwhelmingly the vast majority of Latinos in Florida are legally documented. In 2023, Florida was the 4th state by input into local construction, with a total market value of almost $24 billion. That's less than half of the state of Texas, which reached $50 billion, California at $46 billion, and New York at $28 billion, just a little bit more than Florida. So Florida's construction boom, compared to other states of its size, isn't really that impressive when you consider that California and New York both had larger volume of construction work monetarily. Go figure that the state of New York has a smaller population than Florida, but it had more economical input in construction. That is because in Florida, construction amounts to nothing more than single-family home construction, while other states like California, Texas, and New York are investing in industries and infrastructure. In comparison, the state of Texas, with only a quarter more population, had 2 times more value in construction. Despite that, some specific places in Florida have had more population growth than anywhere else in the United States. For example, between July 2020 and July 2023, 3 of the 7 metropolitan areas with the most population growth were in Florida, that being at Port St. Lucie, which added 38,000 people, Jacksonville, which added 34,000 people, and Cape Coral, which added 29,000 people. Now, Cape Coral would include Fort Myers, Lee County. Of course, that's nothing compared to San Antonio, Texas, which added 56,000 people, and Fort Worth, Texas, which added 54,000 people. And keep in mind that both Fort Worth and San Antonio are more affordable than Florida. The workforce in Texas is also more inclusive. When it comes to metropolitan areas with the biggest increase in construction jobs, Tampa came in at number 8 with a 14% increase. In one particular zip code in the Tampa metropolitan area, a place called Parrish in Manatee County outside of Bradenton had the 9th fastest growing zip code in the United States. Now, places like Salt Lake City, Nashville, Phoenix, and Austin far surpassed the growth in construction jobs over the last year. So Florida is no longer the king of growth and development in the United States. For a few years there, it was the fastest growing place, but today it's being outpaced. And without a doubt, the overwhelming majority of that labor force that led to the growth in Florida was related to nothing more than undocumented workers. At least here in Southwest Florida, about 95% of man hours spent on construction sites are undocumented workers, with a few exceptions like inspectors and some electricians. The vast majority of people that work building new home construction in Southwest Florida or any of the other building projects that are taking place here in this part of the state are undocumented. A few years back, I was living in Fort Myers, Florida, and the street that I lived on had 5 houses pop up. And every day as I took a walk, I got to meet the workers and determined that effectively just about every single last one of them was undocumented, with the exception of the people providing the transportation, the general contractors, and of course the inspectors. Everybody else, all the man hours, were undocumented workers. Basically, unless it's a steering wheel or a piece of paper, that's the only thing U.S. citizens are touching when it comes to these construction sites. Some particular sectors of new home construction, particularly anything to do with stucco work, is almost exclusively in the hands of Central Americans, with the ability of almost nobody else being able to do this work other than them. If you guys remember, we recently went into North Florida, areas where they don't have undocumented workers, and a lot of their stucco work is falling apart because this is a trade that you have to get the right mixtures. Only they know the right mixtures. In the case of stucco work on the exterior of commercial buildings, this is not some textbook thing. This is real life practice, and only they have it. They dominate this entire sector of home construction. And if you're getting outside exterior construction work, if it isn't Central Americans, you're going to have a very difficult time. Laughable that in the state of Florida, in some counties, when you go and see the structures, they're literally falling apart because in these parts of the state, they're not letting migrants do this work. They have somebody else do it, and it always falls to crap. It has to be them. Only they know how to do it. I know some Cubans down in the Southwest Florida area who tried to learn how to do stucco work. They couldn't figure it out. And these are very skilled construction workers. When it comes to anything that's finishing work, stucco, painting, all those types of like finishing touches on construction sites, it's mostly going to be Central Americans, particularly Hondurans, Salvadorians. They have a show code on that. They're the ones who do that work. Nobody does it better. They're the most skilled workers. They're the most proficient workers. And when you hire somebody else, it never comes out as good. They're skilled workers, and this is what they do best. And if you do find a U.S. citizen who does stucco work, they're going to be doing it for ultra wealthy people on a small scale, not the large scale required for commercial construction. If you live in a newer structure in the state of Florida, chances are that the overwhelming majority of the work was done by undocumented workers. Guatemalans, they lay down the bricks. This is the hardest work that only they will do. The stucco and finishing touches, Salvadorians, Hondurans, Central Americans. The only people who were U.S. citizens who touched that building were the people who got paid to build it and the person who wrote the certificate of occupation. A while back when Florida did SB 1718, it was supposed to eliminate undocumented workers from Florida. Nothing happened. There were no changes of any significant volume in the state of Florida, other than, of course, people who had children or mixed national status relationships where they left the state to seek a state that was less prejudiced in Florida. Perhaps about 300,000 people left the state of Florida, and the state of Florida has suffered economically since then. Many people said that SB 1718 would put Americans back on construction sites and take back the jobs that the illegals stole. Yet to this day, I haven't seen a single white person on a roof outside of a police barricade situation. The truth is, even if there was a demand for new home construction, contractors are not going to put homeless people on roofs so they can jump off, fall off, and then sue them. There's just going to be a longer delay on construction. They're going to keep using people who are proficient at work, and everybody who isn't going to get put on a job site. We've seen this happen many times in the United States where people think that if they're able to get rid of the illegal workers, that all of a sudden all these jobs will be freed for them, forgetting the fact that more comfortable jobs that pay more are still not being taken by these individuals. We saw during COVID how everybody was hiring, but nobody was applying. I mean, seriously, which one of these people crying about illegals took our jobs is going to climb on a roof or start to stucco a commercial job site? When I was a teenager, and I'm a Hispanic coming from a poor background, and I have a really good work ethic, a lot better than most of you complaining, I tried roofing as a teenager, 17 years old, got up on a roof, lasted less than half a day. I thought because that hourly rate back then at $170 a day was a lot of money, I wanted the job. I couldn't keep up with these guys. I was a laughingstock to them. And that was when I was 17 years old. I'm twice as old and have 10 times more surgeries. What makes you think that now at my age, I'm going to climb on a roof and start building houses? When I was 17 years old, I couldn't do it. And this is coming from me who's worked with wheelbarrows on construction sites. You have no idea what it's like to get on top of one of those roofs in the Florida heat in the summer and be up there 10, 12 hours a day. But really, it doesn't even matter because Florida's boom is coming to an end either way. As of right now in the Fort Myers MLS, in the last week, 2,600 people have had to make price reductions. That means that for every new listing here in the market, 4 others have to drop the prices. And they're not selling anymore, which means that even if we didn't have mass deportations, these guys would be out of the job site regardless, because construction boom has come to an end in Florida. You get paid in the labor marketplace what you are worth. If you're being paid something, it is because you are contributing something. This is the United States of capitalism. We go by GDP, gross domestic production. In the case of somebody not working, when you have more people, you have more GDP. That is why when we talk about economical growth, we talk about population growth. All the other analytics seem to mean nothing. For example, despite New York and California having a larger construction output than Florida, they're not considered as growing states because Florida's population is growing faster. So in the case of loss like 1718 in Florida, where we lost 300,000 people, it would take another 300,000 people to fill their shoes in order to make up the difference on the GDP loss of those individuals. And that simply isn't going to happen in the state of Florida, because in order for those people to move to the state of Florida, there would have to be first adequate housing being built, and the people who are building those houses are not here right now. You're not only stripping away the population growth. Now, some estimates put Florida's undocumented population at 1.2 million people. I wouldn't doubt that. In the United States, money goes in a full circle. It isn't just what you're paying the person on Friday. It's when they go out to dinner. It's when they go shopping. It's when they buy a pair of work boots. When they go to the gas station and buy a freaking Gatorade. By getting rid of the millions of undocumented workers in Florida, you're not just getting rid of the population growth that the state of Florida has seen, you're also in the long term stripping away from future growth because those people were here spending money. That is why we've seen in Florida gig jobs producing almost nothing. Let me give you a more understandable example. I am an Uber driver as a side gig. As an Uber driver, I have a lot of competition from undocumented workers. These are predominantly Haitians and Dominicans who are working with a rented Uber account. They're in the United States illegally and they're working illegally driving for Uber with a rented account. In other states, you can make considerably more money Uber driving than in Florida because you don't have the vast number of drivers who are willing to work for almost nothing. But on the flip side, when I pick up passengers, 60 to 80% of my passengers over a year ago were Venezuelans, Haitians, and Guatemalans who didn't have a driver's license. So while on the competition end, they made things harder, on the volume end, they also made things easier. Now I have neither the competition nor the passengers, so now my total output is less because despite the fact there were illegals taking jobs from me, there was also the economical input of all the other people that were here undocumented working. So while about a year ago, I could easily say that 60 to 80% of my passengers were undocumented workers, now it's less than 5%. Sure, I don't have the same level of competition, but I also don't have the volume of people that kept my wheels spinning between one pickup and the next. And that's really what happens. It's the GDP that is affected by the volume of people that are taken away. And that's why Florida is hurting right now, and it's not going to get better. In the case of the state of Florida losing over 1 million people, that's a lot of industries and businesses that are going to have to close their doors. And while that may contribute to rent prices declining and rent availability opening, it does not translate into 2025 being a more income year for me than the previous year. It simply isn't going to happen because there's less money moving in the economy. Whether you like illegal immigrants or not, everything that you see in the state of Florida was built by them. From the roads to the electrical to the palm trees to the buildings and even the businesses. We are not in uncharted territory. We have seen SB 1718 and we saw the deportations that took place during Obama and Trump's first run. This isn't a mysterious realm that we are entering. In the United States, we've been here before. We know what the effects of these changes are going to be. In the long term, it will increase salaries, but it will also create inflation on the real estate market. That is, if there is a demand for real estate. In the United States, migrant workers are 100% disposable. You only need toilet paper when you need to wipe. After you've wiped, you don't care if there's toilet paper there or not. At least until you have to go to the bathroom again. And in the case of the United States, perhaps there isn't going to be a demand for real estate in the coming years. There's a lot of truths about immigration that people do not want to hear. One of those being that the goal of U.S. policy on illegal immigration is never to eradicate it, but to oppress it. In order for this labor force to be exploitable, it has to be oppressed. If it isn't oppressed, then it isn't exploitable. By keeping immigrants in a legal limbo, they're able to oppress and suppress these individuals to make sure that they're economically exploitable. The moment these individuals obtain legal status, they are no longer going to work the jobs that they're being forced to work now. Neither party will ever give these individuals full legal status because the moment that they obtain full legal status, they are no longer exploitable. Keeping them in this legal limbo is exactly what the United States does when it comes to foreign policy on escalations globally. For example, by creating destabilization in the Middle East, the United States can obtain its political goals in the area. If an area or a project becomes logistically possible to stabilize a country, then they withdraw. This is the way the United States handles foreign policy. Create destabilization in order to reach your goals. The moment stabilization is reached, you are no longer able to have any power over those individuals. That same policy applies to U.S. internal situations like immigration. If you stabilize or legalize the status of these individuals, then they're no longer exploitable. The power comes from keeping these people in a legal limbo. That's why neither party will ever actually reach giving these individuals legal status, because then they're not exploitable. A lot of people in the United States still don't understand that the United States doesn't fix global problems. It destabilizes areas in order to reach their goals. And internally, the same thing happens. The United States doesn't grant legal status. It creates a limbo for people to never be able to escape that trap. And thus, being weak and vulnerable, they're exploitable. In the state of Florida, entering a construction site is a felony. Nobody can step foot on a construction site except undocumented workers who are there to be exploited. These are buildings that have no certificate of occupation, and the vast majority of construction sites in the state of Florida are out of the reach of the regular person. What happens in these construction sites is between them and Finnair itself. Construction sites are completely unregulated. Only the individuals signing off the certificate of occupations for these new construction sites enunciate any type of existence of these structures. These construction sites will continue to be a place where undocumented workers continue to build America. Let's not forget that right now in the state of Florida, nobody uses illegal undocumented workers more than the state itself. Right now, there are many construction projects taking place in the state of Florida. Highway 82 in Lee County, Highway 70 in Manatee County. Many of the large and massive construction sites that are undergoing right now in the state of Florida are not in the private sector, but they are by the state itself. And the state doesn't regulate or restrict the state. We're going to see immigration raids targeting, of course, communities, targeting businesses, and targeting perhaps people cutting somebody's lawn. But we're not going to see immigration raids at state construction sites, whereas the vast majority of the illegal immigrants today are working in these state construction sites. Laws like SB 1718 restricted how people like me and you are able to benefit from exploiting immigrant workers. However, the U.S. Constitution never restricted people, it restricted government. A fact that a lot of people who talk about the Constitution don't understand is that the entire purpose of the U.S. Constitution isn't to restrict people, it is to restrict government. And a lot of these laws are restricting what people like me and you are able to do, but it doesn't prevent the state from benefiting from the things that me and you are not allowed to do. These are policies that are somewhat against the idea of the U.S. Constitution, that the state can continue to exploit undocumented workers in their projects, but people like me and you are not able to. Loopholes in laws like SB 1718 allowed the government to take full advantage of undocumented workers, and today many of the state's newer projects and infrastructure that the state's been lagging behind for decades on are taking place at the hands of undocumented workers. The purpose of many of these immigration laws are not to eradicate and eliminate illegal people in the United States. That will never happen. The goal of these laws is to create fear, a legal limbo status for these individuals, and by keeping them in this oppressed condition, they are more exploitable. If they become stable enough, they cannot be exploited. While many people believe that there are political affirmations of immigration policies tending towards hating them or supporting them, the reality is that in the United States, all policies work with the conjunction effort of ensuring that these individuals never actually reach full legal status and they remain in a legal limbo. The same people who tell you to hate illegal immigrants were born in South Africa themselves, are married to a Russian mail order bride themselves. The fuel for illegal workers in the United States was new construction. However, that's quickly coming to an end. The new craze now is student visas. South Africans, people from UK, Russians, Brazilians, Ukrainians, all these individuals are coming to the United States right now with the pretext of coming here with a student visa. Any type of trade can have an apprenticeship status visa where people can come to the United States to learn a trade. Technically, these individuals are not supposed to be working. Interestingly enough, many of the trades that they're coming to learn in the United States can actually be learned better in their home countries than here. It's a complete scam. These individuals are using student visas to come to the United States, not to learn their trade, but to actually work for somebody. A vast majority of people who support anti-immigration policies don't give a crap about the sovereignty of the United States. They're people who are filled with hate for outsiders. But little do they know that now student visas are the new thing. And many of the people that are coming to the United States with student visas already speak English proficiently, look like Americans, they're white just like Americans, and they're coming to the United States with a false pretext, that of student visas, pretending in front of the government that they're coming here as an apprenticeship or to study, but in reality, they're coming here to live in the United States. Take a look at the parking lot of these apartment complexes. They are almost completely full. An overwhelming percentage of the units that were vacant are now filled with people here with student visas. These individuals technically should not be working. They're not allowed to work in the United States. They do not have a work permit. However, they use their student visa to get their foot through the door, many times seeking to marry American citizens to further complicate the legal status in order to try to ensure that they can stay in the United States. So while people are concerned about Central Americans installing landscaping or working on a roof, and that's what they view as illegal immigration, many people are unaware that large cities like Sarasota, where I live, are being completely overrun with people who are here with a student visa and they have no intention to study or an apprenticeship that they actually don't need or even care for. These are affluent people who already speak English proficiently, are looking to marry people who are U.S. citizens and encroach upon the United States by deceitful practices. The influx of Australians, English, South Africans, Brazilians, and other people who seem to fairly fade into our communities. These individuals don't even need to work at a job site. They're coming from wealthy backgrounds. They don't need to integrate themselves into the labor force many times. They can live in the privacy of a gated community in a diverse area, fade into the background, living in the United States illegally because the purpose that they came here for isn't really what they're doing. So in order to appeal to the brainless mobs of Americans who see nothing but brown people as a threat, you're starting to see millions of people come into the United States from other countries with illegal statuses, with intentions that are malignant, being here in the United States without anybody even noticing because of their background. So while many people are so concerned about these people that are coming here to work that are easily identifiable, easily detectably, and of course easily deportable, you have a mass of people that are infiltrating themselves deep and ingraining themselves into United States society from countries that speak English, look like Americans, and are trying to acquire the same thing that these illegal migrants are trying to acquire, which is to enter and live and reside in the United States undocumented. But that's the reality of immigration in the United States, particularly in the state of Florida, where so much focus is being put on people that are coming here to work in construction, while in reality, there's an innumerable number of people in the state of Florida that are doing exactly what I said, some type of pretext, a student visa, but that's not really the reason why they're here. I know that in Lakewood Ranch, where I live, a suburb outside of Sarasota, there's Russians, Ukrainians, Brazilians, South Africans. These individuals have a pretext of why they're here in the United States. Many times it's people who are wealthy in another country and are trying to bring their kids to the United States for what they believe will be a better future, but they're not going about it legally. And of course, none of this draws attention to the eyes of the unsuspecting Americans who are more easily deceived with exterior things like appearance of an individual, not aware that overwhelmingly the United States is being overrun by people from every single country in the world. Recently down in Naples, Florida, they just arrested some Latvians for doing some strange real estate fraud, and it just continues. Every time you open up the news, There's a Romanian, Ukrainian, Latvian, Russian. There's always a new criminal, sophisticated network that is in the state of Florida scamming the crap out of people. These are sophisticated criminals that are exploiting the system to enter the United States illegally and run all types of criminal activities. At least the brown people were coming here to work. These people are coming here to scam and finesse everybody. As you drive through the United States, there's something that distinctly marks the state of Florida. In other states, there are tradesmen of all types of backgrounds, but in the state of Florida, everything that you see here, from the signs to the trees to the grass to the buildings, everything that you see here in Florida, 80% of it was installed by an undocumented worker. If it exists in the state of Florida, trees, buildings, roads, anything you see here other than the blue sky itself was built by undocumented workers, where anybody legal just came to sit behind a laptop or sign a piece of paper. Whether you like it or not, that is the truth. The truth behind it is that almost everything that you see here, other than the blue sky itself, was touched by undocumented workers. The incredible growth that the state of Florida has seen can be attributed to nothing more than undocumented workers. And you know, when you look at the state of Texas, the same thing again. What other place has a bigger immigration problem than Florida, Texas? Where do you think all their growth is coming from? It's very clear that the United States is able to grow and prosper thanks to the exploitable immigrant labor force. And nothing makes them more exploitable than their legal status. If they were legal, they sure as crap wouldn't be exploitable.